You are listening to the third segment of the four-part series, Tom Campbell at Sky Blue Symposia. In this segment, Tom discusses relationships in the physical material reality, families, aging, and transitions. We're back with segment 3 of our conversation with Tom Campbell. Tom, as we ended the last segment, we were talking about male-female relationships. We'd like to explore some other relationship topics now in a little bit greater depth, specifically relationships in the PMR amongst families, the aging, and transitions. Chipper has our first question in this topic area.
Tom, this is a question from my lovely wife, who I have a better relationship with her than I've ever expected I would have with anyone. And part of that was due to my realizing that when she describes stuff to me, it's not that she wants me to fix it. It's just that she wants to delineate that structure within which she feels a certain way. But she had a question. As older adults with more time available each day to think about how they live their lives, they find themselves rebalancing between their present work styles in a large corporation, for example, and at the same time working toward identifying fears that lead to holding on to ego. This can slow progress. Do you have any suggestions to people who have a very established work environment and possibly management roles as to how to operate very differently with love when the workplace is not really set up for that approach?
Yeah, that's a problem. You know, we are expected to interact within social structures all the time that have constraints that don't let us really express ourselves fully inside of those structures. I think the thing you can do there is that you can move that structure as much as you have the ability to move it, which means if you're the sole owner of the corporation, you have a lot of leeway. If you're just a low-level employee, then you better you just do what you're told, and you do it the way you're told to do it, and you really don't have any. But somewhere in between are most of us, and we can modify, particularly for managers, we can modify things. We can care about our people. We can care about their careers and giving them opportunities and trying to help them, make it about them. Well, what does this person need to provide a good opportunity for him in his career, as opposed to what do I need this person to do for me? We need to think of both of those things, not just one or the other. So there are things we can do in the workplace, but if you've got a very strict environment in a workplace, you have to abide by those rules and those procedures and the way things are done there. You can't. We don't make a lot of progress by trying to man the ramparts and force the organization to be more the way we want it to be. That usually doesn't work. It just creates more trouble than it solves. If you try to fight the organization, you end up making the organization just retract deeper into its beliefs and into its viewpoints, and don't really make any progress. Get yourself in trouble to boot. So you need to be careful there and realize that people are wherever they are and organizations are wherever they are, and you have to deal with them where they are, and you do the best you can under the constraints that you have, and that's the best you can. And you have to be happy that that's it, instead of feeling bad that you're not doing it as well as you'd like to. You have to deal with the limits that you're given. So it's a tough one. I know exactly what you mean. Offices often require us to be ways that we'd rather that we didn't. That's often why, as people get toward retirement, they see bigger pictures. They understand more what's going on there at the office and what that culture really is about. And they get more and more anxious for that retirement day to come, and less anxious to get up out of bed and go to work in the morning. That's what they call being short when you're a short timer.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep up the pace of giving to that organization when you begin to see the big picture in which that operation works in. When you see the little picture, it's all about your career and the career ladder you're going up. You don't notice those other things. But the older you get, the more you notice what's going on, not only on the lines, but between the lines.
Yeah. Well, that what you described sounds pretty much like how she figured out how to deal with it. Is not adversarially, but supportively for the people that she was involved managerial with. Even though I kept saying, well, do this and do that, and she'd look at me and say, well, that's not going to work. So
Yeah, and you know what's amazing about that if you really care for your employees and care about them, not just care about what they can do for you, but care about them and their careers and their families, because somebody has a big family problem. Well, you need to give them a little special, space to deal with that, instead of saying, well, that's personal business. Just get to work on time and that sort of thing. If you're willing to work with them, you'll get so much more out of them. They don't mind giving you their all and staying late and doing whatever it takes to make a product work. If they know that you really care for them, they'll give it back. So it turns out that that's a really very productive attitude, more productive than the one of enforce the rules. That's not a very productive attitude.
Right. Thank you on that. A related question is regarding our children and young adults. As parents, much energy is spent helping the child build confidence and self-worth. Recognizing that they are important, that they matter, is key to helping them not get too discouraged or depressed in school, social events, and trying to get that career path determined or first job. Then with maturing children, teenagers, parents may find themselves saying almost the opposite with phrases like, we really need to think more about letting go of our ego and identifying the fear at the base of that dominant or angry reaction that we just had. Do you have suggestions regarding the messages we could send to children today that would help them not develop such a strong connection with the stroking of their ego, but at the same time help them navigate in our society with other kids who often are very cruel and with a competitive environment for developing a skill or career or getting into college?
There is a big difference between, shall we say, praising a child for things well done or good attitudes or that sort of stuff, and patronizing them. I think when we patronize them, which often is we tell them that whatever it is they've done or said is wonderful, when it's really not all that wonderful, that may be part of the problem. I think just building up their egos to build up their egos is probably not a good idea. I think they kind of know in their own mind that what they did was just kind of mediocre, or whether it was wonderful, or whether it's something they really worked hard on, or whether it was quick. And if we are too quick to make them feel good about themselves, we could actually be doing them a disservice rather than a service. So I'd say when they do things well, and it could be that it doesn't have to be much, for them to do something well, just a good attitude or a caring, or they pick something up without having to be told, or, just little things like that. You can give them praise. Tell them how much you appreciated it. That certainly was helpful. Thank you very much for picking that up. And we need to be aware of giving them as much positive things as they earn, or at least trying to earn. So yes, be as positive as possible, but don't overdo that. If we overdo it, we create a monster. They feel then like, well, I don't have to do much at all to please them,
Right.
Whatever you do or say they think is wonderful. So that then makes them feel like when you do tell them something nice, well, you really did a good job there. It doesn't mean much. It's like, anything free doesn't have much value. So I think we need to be careful to encourage, but not to
falsely build up.
Yeah, not to build them up falsely. And I think they know the difference when you're just telling them stuff like that, and they discount it. And then when they do something good, you tell them, and they discount that too. And
Right.
pretty soon it's very hard to give them a good feeling about themselves because you overdid it, and they discount everything nice you say to them as not really being sincere. So always be sincere. And secondly, when you get to the teenagers, of course, teenagers have to be treated very specially because you can't just tell them what to do, because what they're doing is finding their own way of doing things. And if somebody's in the process of finding their own way, you telling them the way is not helpful to them. They rebel against that. They don't like that. You know how it is when the children learn something. If a child learns a task of some sort and then you try to do it for them, it incenses them that you're trying to do it for them as if they couldn't do it themselves. That
Yes.
sort of.
Yeah.
So when you try to give a teenager guidance, they often don't like it because what they're trying to do is find their own way. And by giving them guidance, it's like, oh, you gave me the answer. That doesn't help. I need to do this on my own. So we have to, again, look at them and see where they are. Think about them and what they need, and realize that they need to make mistakes. They need to do things on their own, and they need to have guidance, but not orders. Well, it doesn't mean they don't need orders sometimes, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
As I've done something similar like that, and here's how it worked out for me. And you tell them that rather than, I know what you should do. You need to do it this way. Believe me, I know. You see, there's a big difference. One of them, you're just giving them some information and letting them do with it what they want. And the other one, you're telling them what to do. So we need to be careful about how we approach our teens and realize that they are, changing, and they're in a lot of change, and they have to complete these changes on their own. You can't do it for them, which
Right.
means you have to make decisions. And some of those decisions will be poor. And when they're poor, you can't lord that over and say, see, I told you, you need to do that. You need to do what I say, because that doesn't help them grow up. That might help them. That might help them get one thing right. But, that's a battle. They're trying to win the war. So if you constantly tell them what to do and they are obedient and they do it, they come out the other end not having learned anything except to be obedient and do what you're told. Well, that's not what we want them to grow up to be. We want them to grow up to be self-sufficient and able to make their own way in the world, in which case we need to give them a lot of rope when they get in those teenage years. So when they blow off the handle like that, and you'd like to point out that that was pretty self-serving and pretty egotistical and whatever, do it indirectly. Rather than telling them how they're wrong, you should explain to them how you understand how they feel that way. First, get on their side. Explain, yeah, I can see how you might feel that way. And then give them information without it being personal to them. Yeah, I was like that when I was a kid too. And here's what happened to me. You're not telling them the answer, but you're giving them some information that they can use to help them get the answer, but they're still getting it.
Right.
So that's the trick we have to do. Give them information in a way that they can use it. If we give them information in a way that they can't use it, it just makes things worse. And they can't use it if we just tell them how to be. They can use it if we offer it in a non-judgmental way that lets them use it and save face, if you will.
Right. Not practice digging in their heels.
So that's the thing. Yeah, teenagers are very difficult because they are in this indeterminate stage, and they've got to do it themselves, and they've got to do it their own way. And that comes back to us as my parents are stupid. My parents don't know anything. Yeah. Well, that's just a way of them expressing this thing about I have to do it myself. It's not really so much that they think you're stupid as it is they don't really know what's going on either. They're not really intellectually aware of why they do and feel and say the things they do. A lot of it's being pushed by hormones and pushed by other things, and they're just getting through it the best they can. And we need to be as helpful and not push back, force
Right.
them to be nice little adults, because they're not. They're not adults. Process that we need to be very sympathetic with that, and often giving them examples of ourselves and our bad judgments and the things that happen to us, and so on, will help them. And they know that you're trying to help them on some level. They know that you're caring, and the reason that you're complaining about their behavior is because you care about them. But that doesn't help them grow up. You're just suggesting to them behavioral changes, and that's not really helpful to them. They need information that they can use in terms of making their own decisions better, making better decisions. So if you think of it that way, would be my advice. Don't be judgmental. Be as positive as you can. But I mean, sometimes you have to just say no, right? You have to lay down the law and put your foot down and say no. You are not going to go out with that person. You're not going to stay out all night. You're not going to Fort Lauderdale with your friends for 2 weeks. You sometimes have to do that because you have to protect them. That's your job.
Yeah, that's also, you need to give them the fence that they're looking for sometimes, and patience comes in mighty handy during those learning experiences.
And sometimes you give them the excuse that they're looking for. They really are very nervous about going off with their friends for 2 weeks. They're not so sure that's going to be a good idea. And if you say no and they get to say, oh, my parents say no, they can save face with their friends. So sometimes you're giving them an excuse that they're looking for. But yes, often you're giving them that fence. But they need to have structure. I mean, people need structure. Without structure, things lose meaning. So the structure is important, and consistency to structure is important. And other than that, good luck, my friend. I've been there and done that.
Well, she's no longer a teenager. She's mid-20s, and I think we did okay. Yeah, I'll know next time, I guess.
I had a friend who had all daughters. He had, I think, four daughters, and they were all very close in age. And he was very fond of saying that at 13 they don't sane and don't become, and start to come back to sanity somewhere after 18. By mid-20s, they're wonderful again, just like they were when they were 10.
Yeah. Well, thanks. That'll be pleasing for my wife to hear those answers. Thank you.
Tom, we're going to jump over to Susan and the later stages in life.
Okay.
Hi, Tom. I wanted to speak with you about dying, or a transition to another reality is probably a better description of it. In Tibetan Buddhism, dying is seen as a process of moving through bardo, or transitional states. The first one being when an individual unit of consciousness experiences the divine and bliss, and they call it returning to our original state. This is then followed by a terrifying hallucination where one faces negative projections or fears. And they say that these then help decide on the next incarnation. It sounds to me somewhat like tests where we have opportunities to face ourselves fully, sometimes similar to what you've described that can happen in out-of-body states. How does the Tibetans' experience, thus teachings, compare with your experience?
Well, they do sort of agree. It's their metaphors are not that far off from the kind of metaphors I use. They're just a little more dramatic, I guess, than the ones that I use. This idea of you begin with this divine bliss, sort of returning to your original state. You see, I would say that when you die here, you wake up in a different reality frame, one that's meant just for that transition, and the immediate feeling you have is this kind of divine and bliss, because that's a good relaxer. It makes you kind of chill out and get on with business, because this death is usually a pretty unpleasant process. and scary process for a lot of people. And this divine and bliss sense of feeling that you get of having that you're in the right place and everything's going to be okay. That's indeed the kind of feeling that you get, and that you're returning to your original state, that this is where you came from. Well, in a sense it was, because you planned your incarnation in the same general neighborhood and area, and this is where you came from in that sense. That's kind of a local sense of that, but it is. So I would agree with that. And then this terrifying hallucination where one faces negative projections or fears, I wouldn't say it's so terrifying of a hallucination. One, it's not a hallucination, and two, it's not really all that terrifying most of the time. It depends on how grown or ungrown you are. What happens is that if you're grown just enough to where it's worth their while to sit down and talk with somebody about what you want to do next and what you need to work on in the next incarnation, then one of the things that happens is that you have this person, you say like a social worker, right? And they're working with you, and they're talking about, well, we think that you need to work on this or work on that. You really had a lot of fear in this area, and that caused you a lot of trouble last time. So I think something that brings that out and allows you to work on that would be a good thing. And of course, you almost always, to people just beginning, get this thing. What do you mean? What fear? I didn't have any fear about that. It's kind of denial because they don't yet get it. They haven't seen the connections between the way they acted and the fear and the beliefs that they had. So then you get this what they're calling the terrifying hallucination. You get this movie almost that you're looking at that goes right back to where you were indeed, having a very bad case of this fear, maybe anger management or that sort of thing. And it's so obvious that this is the problem, and you go, oh, well, yeah, but it was just that once, So then they film or fast forward and show you another 10 times that are exactly like that, or maybe another 50 times that are exactly like that. And you say, yeah, but it wasn't me. It was because these people did, and then they show you more. So they have this movie of your life and all of the attitudes and feelings that you had. So it's not just the actions. It's that you actually feel the feelings. It's, again, like being there. And no excuses and no way to talk yourself out of this. You kind of see the plain, unpleasant truth of the level of your fear and the level of your beliefs, where you did things that hurt you and hurt others, where you did things where you could have made better choices and you took terrible choices that made things worse for you, that caused you pain. And you get to see all those. And you also can go look at the probability of what would have happened if you made different choices. Oh, remember that choice where you blew up and and then this happened, and then your wife left you, and then all these other things happen, and you say, yeah, that was a terrible time in my life, Those people did that to me, and of course they point out that's not the case. And then they say, well, look, had you chosen to do this instead, here's what's likely to have happened. So you get these sorts of instruction, if you will. I wouldn't call them terrifying hallucinations, but I suppose they might be unpleasant things for many people to see, where your weaknesses and the things you did poorly. But it's all meant to be educational. Nobody's trying to terrify you or make you cry. They want to help you out, so you see a bigger picture next time instead of just the little picture. So these sorts of things do happen, kind of in that order like that. So it's not that far off, but it's a little strong, I'd say, the divine and the bliss. Well, yes, you feel just fine and everything's okay and it's all right, and the fear is gone and all the anxiety are gone, and you might call that divine and bliss, but I think that's a little strong, and the terrifying hallucination is a little strong. But in general, yeah, I agree with what's going on and the order that they happen in.
That's very reassuring to hear that, because some of their language, I don't know if it's a cultural difference or not. It is a bit extreme. So that's very helpful. And
it's the same thing talked about on the very first question, and that is nobody's really going to listen to you if it isn't scary.
Very true. Very true. Well, I think this will be very helpful. And I've heard you say that dying can be an opportunity for a consciousness boost. Could you speak some more of that and maybe advice to dealing with any resistances that might arise as we move through this transition period?
Well, yes, and depending on how the listeners out there interpret that, I want to make clear that that doesn't mean that you get a boost in the quality of consciousness because you've died.
Right.
Just dying doesn't give you this suddenly you become illuminated because you're dead. That doesn't happen. People have that idea, said, oh, when I die, I'll know all the answers, and I'll be perfect then. It's just this body I'm in is why I'm imperfect. It's not like that. When you die, you're really not much better than you were just before you died. You don't get a boost to your consciousness for dying. But the process of dying itself,
yes,
the process of getting old, and the process of dying, the process of getting old makes you, or helps you, encourages you to see what's important and what's not. When you're young, you're so what they say, you're up to your waist in alligators, so you're not worrying about things that are going on in the next swamp. You're just totally focused on all the emergencies and all the things you have to deal with. So you don't really pay attention to the big pictures of things. You're totally caught up in the little picture. As you age, that changes, or at least it has an opportunity to change because you're not so busy. You're not caught up in the little things. You have time to sit back and see things in context, have a more holistic viewpoint. And that's a good opportunity, if you take that opportunity, to grow up. Because when you see things in a bigger picture, you see that what it all boils down to is that love matters. And all of that other stuff you had, all of those fights and all of those squabbles and all of that angst and all that just disappears. It's not important. That the stuff that really is significant is the love stuff. It's the caring stuff. And the things that are really important to you is the stuff you gave, not the stuff you got.
Yes.
When you're young and you do a really good job at work and you get an award, you're real proud of that award and you maybe show it to everybody. But when you're older and you did really good work and got a reward, you're really proud that you did really good work. You see, it's a different thing as you get older. So that's good. And then the dying process, when you know you are about to die, one of a couple of things happen. One, you get paralyzed with fear. And you just are fighting it. No, I don't want to die, and it's this constant denial and fear and fighting. You're not going to learn anything from that. But if in this process of dying, you accept it and you kind of look at your life and see, what was good there? What did I did right? And what would I like to have done over? And, kind of a little, old people like to reminisce, right? Well, part of that reminiscing is just recontacting their life experiences so that they can learn from them. Sometimes when it happened, you didn't learn anything, but on hindsight, you can learn some things about those experiences. So hopefully you'll have enough memory that you can do that. But in any case, not going into death with fear is very helpful. If you go into death with a lot of fear, your transition is going to be a lot more problematical. If you go in as a transition, as death is a part of life. It's the next step, right? It's just the way it is. And even if you have no idea that there's anything after, it doesn't matter. It's just, okay, this is it. You accept it, and you're going to go. You go in with peace and calm. Then you can interact with your family, with your loved ones, and the interactions are good. But you'll learn a lot then. You'll kind of see the things that are important. So it is a growing time, whereas if you interact with fear, then because it's so fear-based, your interactions with other people are shallow and not so useful.
Right.
People are telling you, oh, you'll be all right, you're not going to die, because they know that if they say anything else, you won't be able to handle it. So you can't actually have an honest conversation with anybody. And then you're all alone because you can't really talk to anyone about it because no one will talk honestly with you because they don't think you can deal with it. So being able to deal with it, finding calm, finding peace, acceptance, letting go, kind of going over it and seeing what you can learn, all of this can be very helpful, good opportunities as you get older. But with like anything, there's opportunity for making good choices. There's opportunity for making bad choices too. Yeah. So advice dealing with resistances, what kind of resistances are you talking?
Well, resistances to, as you mentioned, the possibility of death, or that there's a possibility of healing at that time, or putting closure on unfinished business, or not attending to one's own internal process and physical process as well. You know, some people I've seen battle things, remain in denial, or even have regrets about their life. They wish they had done things differently, and therefore wish they had more time.
Yeah, see, all of that's counterproductive. Mm-hmm. Guilt is always useless. You just accept and learn. That's what you do. And yes, you can make peace with things. You can realize that silly argument that you had with your brother and you haven't talked to each other for 10 years, that you're not going to have more than another couple of months. Go call up your brother, ask him how he's doing, tell him that you love him. You can do those kinds of things that you wouldn't have done otherwise, because now you have a bigger perspective than you had before. Before you were wrapped up in ego, and now you realize that ego is useless. That's nothing important there. So it's a good time to take stock and heal, mend fences. All that stuff becomes a lot easier when you realize that ego is not important. It's not where the action is. The caring and the love is where the action is. And if you use that time for healing, then you make good use of it. If you use that time for denial and for fussing and complaining because you're unhappy, because you're going to die and it frightens you, then you've wasted the opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. This is very helpful. I find it extremely wise. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
Yes, thanks, Tom. Prior to the PMR transition, there are other family challenges that are experienced. Sibel would like to ask you a question relating to that earlier time period.
Okay.
It's the universe is giving us a lot more extended caregiving roles, with many elderly with dementia and children and adult children with autism and mental illness. And these are kind of quote-unquote unproductive jobs that are consuming a lot of time and energy. And universe seems to give themes of experience for a reason. What do you suppose is the reason behind this increase in caregiving experience?
Okay, well, there are several. Yes, we are supposed to be learning something about caring and nurturing and environment-caused illness. From the big picture perspective, there is no unproductive job. If one can learn something valuable from a situation, then it's productive. Of course, they were talking about economics, and I'm talking about personal growth. So personal growth is very productive. Given the paradigm that stuff happens and we're just supposed to deal with it, then any situation can provide growth opportunities, and the system is always anxious to give us growth opportunities. But the question is, why are we getting more of this, these types of opportunities now? Well, for one, it's good PMR feedback. Okay, we must live the consequences of the choices we make. Okay, this is true at the individual level and at the collective level. We immerse ourselves in anxiety by day and watch TV and eat junk food by night. We're critically undernourished and grossly overfed. Pain appears to be the most effective teacher. We haven't felt anything yet compared to what is coming. The population is aging, and our individual and collective health is deteriorating. All the things you mentioned are likely to get much worse. And why is that good PMR feedback? I don't mean good in the sense that it's wonderful feedback, but good in the sense it's what we need. We won't act if we don't feel pain. That kind of tells you at what level we are at learning. You know, what sort of critters are there that we know that don't react or don't get it? You know, if it doesn't hurt, well, you know, very young, right? It reminds you of trying to house train a puppy or something. You know, you need to be forceful enough they understand that you don't like that. We learn better by fear, or I shouldn't say by fear, by pain. We learn better by pain than any other way. If we don't get pain, we're not interested in learning. We're just interested in kicking back and saying, everything's great. Don't change what isn't broken. And we let it all slide. If we get pain and enough pain, then we start to think, what's wrong? What should we do differently? So when we see these all these people who need this extra help, partly that's just feedback coming back. People are eating terribly. There's going to be a lot more poor health in the future. We probably will see in the next, 5 or 6 or 10 years, next decade, that lifespans are actually starting to come down. They're going to stop going up because of the way, we eat and what we do to our bodies. So it's going to get worse. So that's one thing. And it's also good NPMR feedback. We need something to push us into being less self-centered. And we're now almost grown up enough to be able to handle it and learn from such a lesson. Okay, there was a time when if people were a problem, the thing to do was put them in an institution. Get rid of them, let somebody else handle it. And that's kind of disappearing to the point that more people are taking a responsibility to deal about these with caring and nurturing rather than just, well, not my problem and push it off on someone else. That's good. That's what I mean. We seem to be a little more grown up now, almost grown up enough to be able to handle it and learn from it. It's a tough lesson, but it's a very good lesson. You'll learn an awful lot about giving, which is about love, when you have to help somebody who is cantankerous, when you have to take care of somebody who doesn't even know who you are, when you have to give to people who are in such great need. That's a good learning experience. So in general, I'd say we get what we need and deserve as far as the non-physical goes, non-physical feedback. And that's true individually and collectively. So we collectively kind of need and deserve this feedback. And we're going to deserve a lot more of it if we don't understand what we're doing to contribute to these health problems.
Yeah, I see a lot of it, and I'm in my 40s, and so it's certainly dramatically changed my thoughts about taking care of my health, because I don't want to have 15 years of dependency, And then I watch, the adult children who are in their 60s or are taking care of someone who's in their 80s, and they have to be so adult because they don't get understanding, they don't get appreciation, you can't reason anymore. You just have to be forgiving.
Right. You can't, I'll help your needs if you help my needs. It's just, how can I help your needs?
Yeah, and if the caregiver can't get into that place, it's a pretty painful job.
Yes, it's a pretty painful job, but it's being done more and more. The fellow that runs my forum, Ted Ballers, he spent 10 years taking care of his father who had severe Alzheimer's, and then probably, I don't know, it wasn't that long after his father passed away that he had another long spate of taking care of his mother, who then went into Alzheimer's. So he spent, 2.5, well, maybe 2 decades, maybe 1.5 to 2 decades with a job of just taking care of parents.
Yeah, and I can see it. It's gonna affect the culture. It hasn't quite yet, but
Yes, we'll wait till the population, the big population boom that everybody talks about, the big baby boom is getting to that age where in the years to come, there's going to be a lot more of what you're seeing. This is just the beginning of that. I'm at the very beginning of that baby boom. Matter of fact, I just come like a year before it was officially started, like the 1945, 1946. Those are the years where they say the baby boom started, and I was born in 44. So I'm just on the leading edge of that, and I'm a couple of years out of being 70. So, the baby boom is in their middle 60s now, the leading edge of it, and it won't be but another decade or two before the number of people who fall into that category of needing a lot of loving service is going to grow dramatically. Hopefully, we will continue to take care of them and find ways to meet their needs lovingly, and not just send them off to an institution to, die.
yeah. Well, it is happening a lot less. Yeah, and since I work with the elderly, one of the things that's interesting is that 2-year-olds are fairly uniform, but 60-year-olds, you have the possibility of being a marathon runner or being in a wheelchair. So in your older years, there's so much open possibilities,
With 2-year-olds, you all start at about the same place and then grow differently. So in the beginning, there's not a lot of difference. But on the other end, you're all totally different. And then you all kind of come together to the last days where you die, and you come at it from a lot of different places.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Before we close this segment, Tom, would you tell us a little bit about the books that you have?
Sure. Those people who are listening to this who want to know more, have an interest, there's several places you can go. One, of course, would be my website, which is www.mybigtoe.com. There you will be able to buy books, but if you really don't want to buy a book, you can go to Google Books and you can read it there for free. Otherwise, you could go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or any bookstore, and if they don't have it, you can always order it. So it's available pretty much out there in all the usual ways. You go to my website, and there's a forum there. And on that forum, there's lots of discussion and lots of very smart people who have been talking about this and thinking about it for a long time, very knowledgeable. And that would be a good place to either just read. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of posts there on every subject imaginable. And that would be a good place to find out more of your specific questions. Otherwise, for general information, go to YouTube. And YouTube, you could type in my YouTube ID, which would be TWCJR44, or you can just type in Tom Campbell, or you could probably just type in My Big Toe, and you will be able to get it pretty quickly. Or you can go to Google and Google Tom Campbell or My Big Toe, and they will show you lots of places that you can go. But the YouTube station is nice, or I guess channels, what they call it, is very nice, because I have all of the workshops and all of the interviews that I've done go up on YouTube. And they're available for everyone for free. One of the best ones, if you want a good summary of the ideas here and get a good understanding of the theory as well as the practice of how to apply it, would be the Calgary workshop. And it came in a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Basically just a few hours on Friday intro, and then Saturday is the theory and Sunday is the application. So if you go there, you will get perhaps more than you really want, but still it's a good overall view of what I'm all about and what my theories are. You'll get more of the science there, because I deal with the science more in my lectures than I do in my books, because the books are really targeted to a very general audience, and the workshops are people who are already interested or they wouldn't be there. If you want more of the science, find it at YouTube. You can find it on YouTube, and you can find it at MBT Events. That's the third place to go. MBTEvents.com are the people that do my organization, my scheduling. They put the things up on YouTube for me, and they schedule where I go and when I go there. So that is a good site to find out what's happening in the near future. Well, that's about it. So I urge everyone to look into more detail, because in an interview like this, it's very difficult to give you enough detail to answer even your most fundamental questions. It's kind of a quick pass over the top of a lot of very interesting ideas, but there's really not a lot of time for deriving the answers that I give. I just state them, and that's that. You kind of have to take it at words value, and that's sometimes not good enough for a lot of people. They'd like to see, well, why did he say that? Where did that come from? Well, you'll find it on YouTube and in the books.
Thanks, Tom. This completes the third segment of the four-part series, Tom Campbell at Sky Blue Symposia.